she demanded. "Put my name on your family estate or I'll make this divorce expensive." I just smiled. All right. I let her file the papers, knowing she was certain she'd get half of the $12 million mansion. But at mediation, when my dad's trust documents appeared, her lawyer suddenly went silent. "My name is Ethan Parker, 37 years old. On paper, I'm the co-founder of a mid-sized tech company, enough to live comfortably without relying on anyone. But in the eyes of many, I will always be Mr. Parker's son, the man who built a real estate and finance empire before quietly retreating to Europe to spend his final years with my mother. My father never believed in the stability of modern marriage. He loved my mother, that was true, but he had witnessed too many divorces turn into battlegrounds for plunder. Assets torn apart. Children dragged in as shields. So very early on, he did something most wealthy people hate even thinking about. He created a trust. Don't be upset if people call me calculating one day. He once told me when I was 28, the first time he showed me a copy of that trust. I'm not protecting money. I'm protecting the work of my entire life, so it doesn't become the spoils of some wrong marriage. Back then, I just laughed, still carrying the faint romanticism of youth. I'm not going to marry the wrong person, Dad. He only smirked, the kind of smile older men give when they've seen far more than they believe. I met Sophia 2 years after that conversation, at a gathering of mutual friends. She wasn't the type of woman who walked into a room and made everyone turn their head. Her beauty wasn't loud like that. She had soft brown hair, blue eyes that weren't too bright but deep, and a slightly shy smile, as if she always kept a part of herself hidden. My first impression of her wasn't beautiful, but perceptive. While others chatted loudly about stocks, crypto, real estate, Sophia sat quietly, listening. When someone asked her something, she responded briefly but sharply. She worked in marketing for a fashion brand, good salary, but not top 1%. She told us about clients wanting to look ultra-rich with budgets that didn't match. We laughed, and the night slipped by as smoothly as wine. I didn't tell her from the start how wealthy my family was. I drove a normal car, dressed simply, and when someone mentioned Mr. Parker, I just smiled and changed the subject. Not because I was ashamed or testing anyone, just because I hated the way people's eyes changed colors when they learned how many zeros were in my father's account. Sophia liked beautiful things, that much was clear. She lingered in front of boutique windows, looking at handbags and shoes too expensive to buy 3 pairs at once. But I never thought that was an issue. Who doesn't like beautiful things? I liked watches, good speakers, good wine. Did that make me a bad person? We'd been dating almost a year before I brought her to the villa for the first time. When the door opened, she stood at the threshold in silence. Golden light from the chandelier fell onto the marble floor, reflecting onto the high ceiling, creating that feeling magazines like to call luxury. "Whoa," she breathed. "This is your house?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I said something more accurate. "My parents' house. I'm just staying here and taking care of it for them." She turned to me, eyes still wide. "But you live here alone?" "For now." All evening, she wandered slowly through the rooms, touching the furniture, asking about this painting, that piano. There was something childlike about her fascination, and I found it endearing. "I feel like I'm walking into a magazine," she said, curling up on the couch. "If I lived here every day, I don't think I'd ever want to leave." I laughed, not thinking much of it. That night was the first time Sophia stayed over. We got married a year after she moved in. The wedding wasn't extravagant, but enough to satisfy both families. My parents flew home for a few weeks to meet their future daughter-in-law, signed some documents with the lawyer, then left again. One night, I overheard my mother telling my father, "She seems okay. But I don't know if she loves him or loves this address." My father replied simply, "It doesn't matter. The paperwork is ready." I pretended I didn't hear. After the wedding, the first months of married life were peaceful. We argued about who washed dishes more, about me forgetting to buy milk, about her buying too many scented candles. All the small, silly arguments people say only happen because you live together. But by the second year, the topic of arguments shifted. Money. Not lack of money, but whose money, and who it belonged to. Sophia's wording started to change. Instead of, "Can you help me pay for this?" she said, "We should have a joint account." Instead of, "Can you buy me this bag?" she said, "As your wife, I have a right to part of the assets." At first, I thought she simply wanted security. I wasn't stingy. I let her use a supplementary credit card, covered large expenses, didn't complain. But when she started talking about joint ownership of things that didn't belong to me, I began to feel the boundary being crossed. "I want my name on the house," she said one Saturday night during dinner. "At least on the paperwork. In case something happens, I don't want to be thrown out." I set down my utensils and looked at her for a long time. "Sophia, I've told you. This house isn't mine. It belongs to my parents. I can't add anyone's name. Not even yours." "There you go again," she shook her head, scoffing. "Do you think I'm stupid? You live here, pay utilities, renovate. You treat it as your home. The court will treat it as marital property. That's what my lawyer said." I blinked. This was the first time she mentioned a lawyer. "When did you talk to a lawyer?" "Why do you care?" she snapped. "I'm just protecting myself. Who knows if you'll change your mind one day." "Change my mind about what?" "About this marriage." The answer cut deeper than I expected. Not because I feared divorce, but because I suddenly realized she'd been standing on the opposite side of us long before I noticed. Weeks later, Sophia's attitude changed completely. She became confident in a strange way. She met friends more often, and I overheard pieces of her conversations. "Yeah, that house is worth at least $12 million. No, our names aren't both on it yet. But if we divorce, I can still get half." "Yeah," the lawyer said not to worry. Once, when she walked into a room not knowing I was there, I heard clearly, "Even if we divorce, $6 million is still a nice compensation for my youth." Not bad at all. I stood in the hallway, fists clenched until my knuckles turned white. That was the first time in months I realized my father, the man who had flown back to Europe, had been right all along. The afternoon Sophia dropped a stack of legal papers on the table and issued an ultimatum. I wasn't surprised. "Either you add my name or I'll make this divorce very expensive," she said. "Are you sure you want to talk about this that way?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. "Don't use that calm tone on me," she hissed. "You don't want to lose half the house, right? Trust me, the court will side with me." I looked at her and no longer saw the woman who frowned when I ate instant noodles instead of rice, who fixed my collar before meetings, who held my hand in the hospital when I had my appendix removed. I saw someone calculating numbers. "I can't add your name," I said for the last time. "Not because I don't want to, but because it's not mine to give. I've explained this so many times." "Then we'll meet in court," she said. "The papers are ready." She set the pen on the table. "You just need to sign." I looked at where she pointed. Petitioner, Sophia Lane Parker. Respondent, Ethan James Parker. Black ink on white paper, clean, cold. I signed without hesitation. Sophia froze for a second, surprised I signed so quickly, but she recovered fast, gathered the papers, and zipped her bag. "You'll regret this," she said. "You really will." I didn't respond. She walked straight to the door, confident, certain she'd already won. When her car engine faded away, my phone buzzed. An email from the family lawyer. Subject: mediation schedule confirmation message. "Ethan, the first mediation will be on the 18th. Bring your personal documents. Leave the rest to us." I read the last line, and for the first time in a long while, I felt I could breathe. Leave the rest to us. Sophia thought this would be a legal battle between husband and wife. She didn't know there was a third player at the table, someone who had prepared everything years in advance. My father. And a folder labeled, Revocable Living Trust. Part 1 of our story, or rather, her story, ended the moment I closed my laptop, leaned back in the chair, and stared at the ceiling of the $12 million villa she believed she would soon own half of. I just thought, let's see. At mediation, the law will speak for me. I arrived at the mediation 30 minutes early. The conference room was on the 14th floor of the law office, large enough for 8 people to sit around a long glass table. The windows opened to a full view of the city, buildings layered over one another, the morning light filtering through thin clouds and spilling over the polished wooden floor. The atmosphere was quiet, like the moment before a storm. My family's attorney, Mr. Campbell, was already there. A man in his 60s, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, with the rigid bearing of someone who had spent his life in courtrooms. "Did you sleep?" he asked. "Some," I replied. "This won't be pleasant," he said flatly. "She's walking in today expecting to win." "I know. But don't let emotion get in the way. Let the documents speak." I nodded. All my life, I had hated my father's line, "The paperwork will protect you," but today, I found myself hoping he was right. The door opened again. Sophia walked in as if stepping onto a stage. She wore a simple, elegant cream-white dress, light makeup, softly curled hair. She looked beautiful. Beautiful in a way that made you forget she was here to try to bankrupt you. Beside her was her attorney, a tall woman in her 40s, sharp-eyed, confident. Sophia looked around. Her gaze landed on me for just a second, expressionless. "You're early," she said. "I wanted to prepare." "So did I." She sat across from me, legs crossed, palms resting neatly on her lap, the perfect image of a woman fully confident in the legal battle she believed she had already won. Campbell leaned slightly toward me and murmured, "Watch closely. People like her fear only one thing, the truth." The mediation began with the standard process. Confirming identities, purpose of meeting, reminders about neutrality. Sophia's lawyer spoke first. "My client requests a discussion on the division of marital assets, specifically the real estate property the couple has jointly used for 3 years. Sophia nodded, fingers interlaced, her voice firm as she added, "And because we lived in that house as a family, because I contributed my effort in maintaining it, cleaning, decorating, and using the shared space, I am legally entitled to an equivalent portion." I replayed that sentence in my head. An equivalent portion. Equivalent to what? Her effort? Her financial contribution? Or just her ambition? Campbell said nothing. He simply waited for them to lay out their entire argument. "Therefore," Sophia's attorney continued, "my client seeks a fair settlement. 50% of the house's value, $6 million, in compensation." Sophia tilted her head slightly, casting me a look as if saying, "See? Everything is straightforward." The only sound in the room was the steady hum of the air conditioner. Campbell opened his briefcase, placed a document folder on the table, and slid it forward with 2 fingers. "Very well," he said. "Then let's start with the most important question." He tapped the folder lightly. "Is that house legally Ethan's?" Sophia's attorney lifted an eyebrow. "Of course. He lives there." "In what capacity? As the owner or as a resident?" Campbell asked calmly. "What resident? He lives independently. His parents don't live there." Campbell didn't argue. He simply inclined his head toward me before answering in an almost gentle voice. "Then let's consult the legal documents before drawing conclusions." He opened a second folder. The first page had a bold title, Revocable Living Trust, Parker Family Estate. Sophia's brows pinched. Her lawyer looked down at the document. I saw her lips stall mid-breath. Campbell spoke slowly, articulating every syllable. "That house is legally owned by Mr. Harold Parker and Mrs. Elaine Parker. They placed it, and all their assets, into a revocable living trust in 2004, nearly 20 years before Ethan and Sophia met. Ethan does not own the house, is not on the deed, and has no authority to transfer, modify, or make any legal decisions regarding it. He paused, then continued. A person who does not own an asset cannot be forced to divide it. Sophia blinked. Once, then twice. What did you just say? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. You heard correctly, Campbell replied. Ethan does not own the house. It is not marital property. And under state law, usage does not equal ownership. Sophia's attorney flipped through her papers so quickly the pages crackled. But they lived there, she protested. Campbell had already prepared for that. And here, he added, placing a third document folder on the table, are the property tax records, maintenance bills, repair invoices, insurance payments, all paid by Mr. and Mrs. Parker. None of them are in Ethan's name. Then came my own bills. The only expenses Ethan paid were utilities, electricity, water, internet, food. Routine living expenses. Nothing that contributes to property value. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly, like a cold wind sweeping through. Sophia slumped back in her chair, face drained of color. She glanced at her lawyer as if hoping for a miracle, but the woman's expression had turned tight with concern. What about her cleaning? Decorating? Minor fixes? Her attorney attempted weakly. Campbell exhaled softly. Not considered a contribution to property value. State Supreme Court ruling from 2016. Those fall under everyday use, not ownership. Sophia's fingers clenched the chair arm. No way, she whispered. She looked at me, eyes unfocused, fear flickering behind them. Ethan, you knew about this from the start? I met her gaze steadily. I told you many times, Sophia. I don't own that house. You didn't believe me. But my lawyer said, she stammered, turning toward her attorney. Her attorney swallowed before speaking. I need a few minutes to speak with my client privately. Those words always mean one thing, they've lost. They stepped out for 5 minutes, though for Sophia it must have felt like hours. When they returned, both faces had changed. Sophia's lawyer sat down and exhaled heavily. After reviewing the documents, my client withdraws the first claim. She said withdraws the way someone says, we attacked the wrong battlefield. Sophia kept her head down, shoulders trembling slightly. Campbell made a note. Very well. Let's move to the remaining assets. Sophia's attorney tried to salvage something. We request an equal division of the joint savings account. That's fine, Campbell replied. But per bank records, 80% of that money was contributed by Ethan. Her portion doesn't offset the expenses he independently covered during the marriage. Silence. The car, she tried. The Lexus? Ethan purchased it before the marriage. Investment assets? None in her name. The lawyer let out a long, defeated breath. Sophia remained silent for more than 10 minutes. When she finally looked up at me, her eyes were red. So I really get nothing? There was no arrogance left, no bravado, just emptiness. She didn't cry. But she was breaking. I answered slowly. If you want to divide something, it has to be something that belonged to us. That house was never mine. She bit her lip but said nothing. The mediation ended with a simple, brutal conclusion. Sophia would leave the marriage with almost nothing. Not because I wanted it that way, but because she demanded something that had never been mine, and ignored every explanation from the man she called her husband. As everyone packed up, Sophia walked up to me. Not to apologize, not to plead, just to whisper, was I wrong? I looked at her one last time and sighed. It wasn't wrong to want security, Sophia. It was wrong to turn our marriage into a transaction. She closed her eyes, as if the words hurt more than any ruling. Then she walked away. Without looking back. I left the room a few minutes later. In the hallway, I found her leaning against the wall, one hand over her mouth, breathing hard like she might faint. I wanted to walk over, ask if she was okay. But after a few seconds, I turned around. Not because I was cruel, but because I had done everything I could. She was the one who chose this battle. And today, The law simply showed her the consequences of the seeds she had sown. This house is strange. It's not just a $12 million mansion. It's everything I've tried to protect, since the day my parents built it, to the day I stepped in and took on the responsibility of maintaining and managing it. Every painting on the wall, every piece of furniture, every step across the soft carpets holds memories, thoughts I've never been able to put into words. And now, standing in this very house, I realize something clearly. Sophia is gone, but my life keeps moving forward. The entire week after the mediation, I didn't see or hear anything from her. The calls from her lawyer were just updates about asset division. So many assets she believed she would walk away with. But after that mediation, I no longer felt any pressure. She must have finally understood that everything happens for a reason, and that anger can't win her everything she wants. What surprised me the most was the peace inside me. At first, when she left, I didn't know what I would feel. A part of me thought I should feel like I'd failed, that I couldn't save this marriage. But another part of me felt lighter, as if a heavy weight had been lifted. I no longer had to deal with unreasonable demands, or arguments about things that were never mine to begin with. This marriage, looking back now, was nothing more than a prolonged misunderstanding. And misunderstandings built on something that was never real love. Another month passed, and I began to grow used to the quiet in this empty house. It's strange, when you're used to someone's laughter beside you, one day the house can fall completely silent and you don't feel the emptiness. The same old paintings, the same sofa where we sat together every night, but now it was no longer our home. My father called after a few days of quiet. "Are you all right, Ethan?" His voice was warm, tinged with concern. "Have you thought everything through?" "Yes, Dad. I'm fine." I looked around, and whether I wanted to or not, I couldn't hide the calm settling inside me. "Honestly, I feel much lighter. You did the right thing. I don't want you tied down by things that were never yours." I knew he worried about me. He wasn't a man who showed his emotions easily, but he'd always been the one person I could trust. Life had never been simple for us, but his lessons were always clear. He understood one thing: nothing is more important than freedom. And freedom was exactly what I found, after the divorce. Another month passed. I returned to the business, to the unfinished projects I had neglected during all the chaos with Sophia. The company was thriving, our new product received excellent feedback, and new contracts started coming in. Slowly, I realized my life could shift in a direction I'd never imagined. I began spending more time with old friends, the people I had pushed aside during my marriage. Dinners without tension, conversations free of financial or emotional strain, just simple, fulfilling moments. Relationships I neglected, interests I ignored, they all came back to me. And in those moments I realized something. I had lost so much of myself because I had poured everything into someone who no longer loved me the way I once loved her. I didn't see Sophia even once after she signed the divorce papers. But I knew she moved on. Maybe she found someone new. Maybe she no longer remembered what happened between us. But I couldn't forget that what she loved wasn't me. It was what she thought she could take from me. And now I have nothing left to lose. One day my father called again. "Ethan," his voice was more serious this time. "There's something I need to tell you. About the house." I sighed. "Dad, I've already told you. That house isn't mine, and I don't want any connection to it anymore." "I know. But," he paused, "you might not realize this, but I've prepared something for you since you were young. Once everything is over, you may not want to look back at what I've done. But I've left you something, not money, not property, but freedom. So you never have to be tied down by anyone or anything in your life." I fell silent. His words weren't like his usual advice about life or work. This was a reminder of what I had truly lost. Not property, but myself. "Dad," I said softly. "Thank you. I understand." A week later, I stood in the living room, looking out the window. The city was the same, Everything still moved forward, even though Sophia and I no longer walked together. I realized everything had its purpose. The house, the marriage, the divorce. They were all parts of a larger story, one I couldn't see at the time. But now I could. Loss is part of life, but change is something I can choose. And I choose not to bury myself in the past. I choose to move forward. Because, as my father said, freedom is something I've regained. And I will never let anyone, or anything, take it from me again. I looked down at the table where my father had left me a letter, not because I needed it, but because it was the one thing that could help me find myself again in a world that had changed. I opened the letter, and from it, a new path unfolded.